Willkommen zum Hypno School Podcast mit Astrid Krimmel und Stin-Niels Musche, deiner professionellen Quelle für Hypnoseausbildung und Hypnosefortbildung. Hier sind deine Gastgeber, Astrid Krimmel und Stin-Niels Musche.
Welcome everyone to a very special landmark edition of Hypno School Podcast. I'm your moderator, I'm Yui, and today we are celebrating our 100th episode here. And this means, what does it mean? Now, to mark this incredible journey, I must say, we have a truly legendary setup right here. A lineup that I'm really glad that I'm here and I can show you who's with me here in a moment. But before, joining us is today from Canada, the creator of the Simpson Protocol, and that is no one else than the woman who shifted the paradigm of modern hypnosis. This is Ines Simpson.
Yay!
Yes.
Hi, Uwe.
Hello. And with her, with Ines, there's a man who is carrying that torch into the future. I can say the CEO of Hypno School and Ines is and Ines' designated successor, Stin-Niels Musche. He's here with us as well. Welcome, Stin. Hi.
Hi, and welcome. Not from Canada. Yeah. So I like this setup because, you're in Cyprus, Ines is in Canada, I'm in California, so it's very...
That's international.
Globally connected.
And if we need to translate for people, Canada is Canada. So
yeah.
Was it Dr. Frederick Mao who came up with that back in 2014?
No, I think it was you.
Fun of the Canadian money. I don't know.
No, that was you, I think.
I'm not sure if it was just me. So yeah, Canada is Canada, and it's our little insider thing, Canada.
Yeah.
And they have beavers on their money and geese.
Well, we have many little animals on our money.
Many little critters. Okay, but we are here to talk about hypnosis and especially about my, let's say, biggest love in hypnotherapy, the Simpson Protocol. So, and I'm pretty sure that Uwe has prepared some deep dive good questions to...
I'll just have shallow questions, but
okay.
Wait give me a moment.
Okay,
I will
good.
right now. So we are exploring today the gold standard of hypnotherapy. Ines is here, Stin-Niels is here, and welcome to the 100th episode. And let's just start with the first question. So about the origin story, about the Simpson Protocol, I would love to ask Ines. Ines, you were trained by the great Jerry Kind in traditional regression, but you eventually maybe felt something like a need for something different, I guess. So
Took a while.
Yeah, can you please maybe talk a little bit about the specific moment or the case when you felt like what kind of moment led to the birth of the Simpson Protocol? How we know it?
Well, originally we're in the right at the very beginning. It was just a question of not knowing what to do and having to find something, because people wouldn't tell me things. Men wouldn't tell me why they were raped. So I wanted to find a simpler way of doing it. But when I started it with my conscious mind, and I did all the old stuff. So I had to I went to Esdale, went to, get there. And Jerry said, experiment 10% of the time. Well, I think I did it more like 50% of the time. But he was great because he gave me the whole idea that the person you're working on is God.
Mm-hmm.
They are everything. So if they're not very open, that's going to happen to restrict them.
Mm-hmm.
So what you want is openness, you know. So I just started with my clients, and I think it was a couple of years. The first time I ever presented it at the NGH, it was working in Nesdale and beyond.
What year was that, roughly?
Well, 2005, 2006, I don't know. I'm a little bit funny about I just forget dates. I just don't remember anything. But it was around then, 2006, I think. And that was very different. I listened to it the other day. It was so good.
Sweet.
But it was definitely not at SP level now.
Yeah.
It was great to start with, though.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I remember the beginnings. I was there as well. I learned the Simpson Protocol from you, and yeah, I see the difference from where it is now and where it was there. And I have another question for you, for those who know the work, or who know the Simpson Protocol, or who don't know. There is a superconscious mind where we talk with, let's say, and Ines, how would you describe this level of mind compared to the traditional subconscious?
Well,
With
it's not the subconscious. It's outside and inside the body. It's everywhere. So I don't like to ever really explain everything it is, because I would minimize it. And it would become just this, what you said. And it's everything. I don't know what it is, because I don't want to explain it to the point where it defeats the purpose.
And as I usually say, because, I'm a younger generation, I always say it's like the universal force. It's like, I mentioned that in another episode of this podcast already. It's like, well, when George Lucas developed the Force in Star Wars, he was leading to ancient scripts where there was a universal energy written down which is floating to everything. So, well, we are not like Star Wars, so I can't get just with my idea that the thing is lifting up, but so I always tell people the superconscious mind is like the Force in Star Wars, and we use the Force, this universal thing. So because, as you just said, I don't want to describe exactly what it is, because then we are limiting the thing. It's not a thing.
We don't want it to be, it's just an astounding size, incredible impact.
Yeah.
So we don't want to restrict it.
Mm-hmm.
The finger comes up means now comes something important. So, I had this physics teacher in one of my SP trainings, and I already mentioned that before. So it's like the quote of Nikola Tesla, remember the guy who invented the electric vehicle? Yeah. And he said, if you want to understand the universe, you have to think in frequencies and energy.
Yes.
So, and that is just the thing. It's frequency and energy.
Frequencies and energies.
Yeah. Just my
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. One of the most, I would say, one of the most striking parts of the Simpson Protocol is that the client doesn't have to disclose their trauma, in a way. And how does this content-free approach somehow change the dynamic for the client who might be hesitant to share their deepest secrets? How do you see it, Steen, for example?
So, from my point of view, is that it comes with their bringing back the energy and the frequencies. comes from their intention. They don't have to share anything with me as the therapist if they don't want to.
Nope.
But I always tell them, so I start my sessions with one simple question.
Mhm.
What is your desired outcome of this session today? And you don't have to tell me, but you have to have it in your mind. And this is the way the superconscious mind will guide us through the session to help us to achieve your desired outcome.
And I would like them to be absolutely open.
Yep.
They have
Open
to
for
be
the possibilities.
because the possibilities that they can go beyond their intention. And they can't go beyond their intention if they're limiting it. So we somehow get them to intend and leave it open for
Mhm.
more outcome.
Mm. Okay. And Ines, when we think about now, let's say regression for a moment, and in regression we also have the it can be very emotional and sometimes painful for the client, when there is some abreaction or things like that. How does the Simpson protocol manage to achieve deep change without these intense emotional abreactions?
Well, when I first started, we had some abreactions, about 3 in the time I worked with it. But now, very little. I never see much of an abreaction in the person, because now I've developed it, and Steen's developed it, and everybody has developed it to the point where you're just open and trusting. Now that's the major thing, is they trust. So if the client doesn't trust anywhere, you can maybe bring them up to enough trust, when you're trusting completely.
Yeah.
So with my trust and all that, you get into a point where the superconscious is boss. You never do anything without asking, superconscious, can I do this? And then you would say yes or no. So I always know where to take the person, because I ask superconscious.
Yeah.
Should I take him there? Period. So superconscious say no. Yes. So you're always defined where you're going. There's so much, it's so easy. It's very easy to do if the person is open.
So 2 things I'd like to add. So because you said you rarely see abreactions, what I experienced in the past years is that I see, let's say, positive abreactions. So we have the foundation work in it, and when we bring that out, that sometimes there are some tears, but it's in a positive way, not in a negative way, because when we usually talk about abreactions, it's negative feelings and all that stuff. So I'd say I see more positive abreactions than negative abreactions. So, and because you just said about the trust, so it's something, I guess we both say this to the client upfront the session. So I always tell them, well, you don't have to trust me. You have to have trust in yourself, and you have to have trust in the process. And that's the biggest point for them at the beginning of the session.
Yeah, we agree.
Yay! It's not that often.
Yeah. All right. So, Steen, you as an expert practitioner, how does it change your working day when you don't have to judge the problem or spend hours preparing specific scripts for every individual client? How there for you?
To be honest, I never did any scripts because I just can't. So I learned hypnosis in the most effective ways, because I started learning hypnosis with regression to cause therapy. And I can tell that I was also very mentored, inspirational things with Jerry. So, but how did the Simpson Protocol change my work? Well, I'm a German. And I always say I'm not an architect, I'm an engineer. And yes, it's the way I think I am. It's just my limiting belief. So, and with that, I was always looking for a softer, gentler approach than the regression to cause therapy, and let's say like a more comprehensive is limiting.
Yes.
So,
It's comprehensive.
but at that time, holistic wasn't in my mind when I discovered it, but I was looking for something. It has to be faster, easier for me and the client with less hard emotions. So, and the good thing is, I always like to have SP sessions because, I don't have to prepare anything. You can call me in the middle of the night and say, well, there is an hypnosis emergency. We need you right here. And I can do it like half sleeping, half awake, because I know the process and I know that I don't do the work. I'm just I'm just the guide. I know I always tell my clients, I'm like your guide on a travel. I know the sites and I know how to do the walk, but you have to walk. So I know where we have to go, but I'm just sitting in the passenger seat and give you the directions where to walk. And the superconscious mind will lead us through the session. So it's
sort of like being the moderator, like you.
Yeah, it's moderating, and it's not us doing the work. It's even it's like exhausting for us because it takes energy. Well, it just, after 3 sessions a day, I'm done. So because it's
I think it's enough. I know people that do 5 or 6, but
Whoa.
you can't deliver good work after a 3rd session. So maybe just a 4th, but and it's easy because I don't have to make many notes in the session. I don't have to prepare anything because I have the structured process and I can just go through it and see where we end up. So just
So when we see this efficiency, I also see, for example, the Simpson Protocol has evolved so significantly over the years that I remember at the beginning it was really like 3 hours one session, and right now sometimes 45 minutes, and that's it. How do you see that how does this change happen, and what made it happen so?
Well, there's many reasons. We're getting bigger morphic field. I think that's one of the questions, but I won't go into it deeply. But we have many people all over the world doing it. So there's more energy floating around. There's more, and it makes everything easier for us.
And at the
So I would say that's that, but also the part is if you're trusting, if your practitioner is trusting and has trust, they can get more than if they just use their conscious minds a little bit. Because that's a little bit is not a problem. You minimize the outcome. You get an outcome. You always get an outcome. But to get an example of a great outcome, the person has to be sort of like Stin and I, you get your trust, period. And I mentioned that again.
Yeah. Uwe, remember when we started back in 2013 with the Simpson Protocol? And We had just the English scripts and that whole thing, and there was the idea. It's a great tool, but there was one little piece missing at the beginning. And guess what it was? Trust.
What?
Trust. It was just
Yeah.
because
So nowadays,
from my point of view, I knew that time back in 2013. It's the thing I was looking for. As I always say, it was like looking for the Holy Grail. And then when I saw the first session, it was like this. There it is. And even with that deep knowing, yeah, that's the way, the trust wasn't there, because trust has to build up. And it's building and building and building. And so nowadays I do stuff in sessions with clients. If I would tell the Stin in 2013, I'm pretty sure he will look at me and say, what kind of bullshit are you doing there?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's because a lot of the people that come to us to learn Simpson Protocol have to unlearn what they know. It's unlearning what you know, because you're using the conscious mind to get into it. We don't use the conscious mind to address it. We get them into using the whole mind. So what they say is the conscious is 10 or 15%, depending on who you talk to. It's just a theory. So you don't want to use the conscious mind. It doesn't have a lot of power.
Yeah. I also see the power of the Ideomotor signals. Yeah, when I really saw this the first time, I was just, wow, what is this? This is so incredible. and these finger signals, yeah, we have for people who don't know the Simpson protocol, it's usually you have a yes and a no finger. Yeah, and then you ask questions, and then the client's yes or no finger comes up. Yeah, and how would you when you now the question to you two, why is this non-verbal communication with the superconscious mind so much more reliable than talking to the client?
Yes, Ines,
you want to go first?
Oh, I can go first, because
you go first.
I always say that the only thing that is disturbing the session is the conscious mind. So if we move on with the fingers, we can just make sure that the conscious mind is not that much interfering, because it's, I'd always like to say, I want to do hypnosis in a, like, within a surgery, but it's not. So on the one hand, the conscious mind is good to understand a little, to help on the conscious way, but it's also the most
maybe
annoying.
at the beginning of the set.
Yeah, and it's also the most annoying and disturbing part.
Yeah. So if I have someone interfering, which that happens, it's usually fear that brings it on, as usual. So you draw their attention to that, and you say, you're not doing it right. You have to let that go and because superconscious is wanting to fix it, but it won't as long as you do it with your conscious. Because they're taking control of themselves. And they want to they have to leave the aspect for the superconscious to take control of it and fix it.
I remember one Simpson Protocol session where I was the client, and I was observing my fingers, and there was the question coming, and I was thinking, oh, I think the yes finger will come up, and boom, the no finger came up. This was just hilarious. I loved it.
Yeah.
And let me just add something with the conscious mind. So I remember, it's a long time ago, Uwe, you did a session with me, and you made let's say, mistake in quotation marks. You made a mistake, and my conscious mind was so interfering from that point on because, oh, you have to tell him this, and let's see if he does any other thing wrong to tell him afterwards. So the conscious mind was, so that session, I don't know what it was, so what the issue was, but we worked on it. But my conscious mind from that point on, it was just looking, what is he doing? Is he doing it in the right way? So less trust, interfering conscious mind, like not a great outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, judging, controlling, it's usually, oops, okay, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see. Now, when we come to the flexibility of the Simpson Protocol, I also see a lot what is possible there right now. And over the years, with all the practitioners who do and who tell their stories, what they did achieve with the Simpson Protocol. And I've seen the Simpson Protocol used for everything, like from quit smoking, from regrowing kidneys, from overcoming heroin addiction. And how do you two see there any limit maybe of what the superconscious mind can
Well, I think the only limit is the person itself. They're what they have in when they came into life, what they promised to do, all that stuff. That's the only hindrance. Because I've had clients before, they've had things with thyroid or whatever, and we couldn't address it because it had been agreed on that place of creation that they would access this through their lifetime.
All right. Okay.
So this person was so angry that she couldn't address it. She was angry at the beginning, and then she settled down into an acceptance, not like, how do I explain? She was good with it, and she started to change. It started changing. But it wouldn't change because at the beginning she was rigid in it. And as it got better, they could make it better for her, but they couldn't fix it completely till she got into space. You know, the general, let's say you got a problem, and the problem is this big. So you start off on it and you get halfway and you just won't go anywhere because your conscious is just got it all rigorously touched. So if they allow it to happen, it can still happen. It'll take longer.
All right.
Yeah. And just let me add one thing. So because we were talking about limiting outcomes, so it's just my theory of the thing. So we also have the, let's say, limiting beliefs from the society, from the mankind, and that field is even stronger than the force within the client. So from my point of view, and I know that's very, let's say, unscientific, but I'm pretty sure we can achieve almost everything because the power of the mind. But, and there is the big but, the energy, the frequencies of the society, which says that's not possible, is stronger than the mind within the person accepting that thing. So it's like, for just a pretty simple example, treating depression. We can fix depression in 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 sessions. But the field, the persons around our patient, they usually say, well, yeah, you now got the hypnosis, but, well, it can't be done in a few sessions. Therapy needs time and a lot of sessions. So that is one limiting thing which is coming from outside, and there's also a strong frequency. So just my theory why
It
there are
means, yeah,
some
that means the
limiting
client
things.
isn't open again.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's everything. If your client is completely open, they'll get completely everything. If they're not, if they're only half open, they'll only get half of it.
All right. So now I have a question for you, Stin. You often describe the Simpson Protocol as pretty organic or open source system somehow. How does this allow the practitioner to integrate their existing skills, for example, like NLP or parts therapy or some other things into this framework?
I love the face of Miss Simpson. Well, we don't need NLP. So NLP is good for communication.
Yes.
So, but from my point of view, it's not good for therapy, but it's good for opening the client or patient up for the therapy. So, and now comes the but. As you just said, like it's an open source. So if you are trained with something or if you are specialized with something, you can add it as long as you follow the philosophy of Simpson Protocol, which means we are not leading. The superconscious mind leads us. So Uwe, you remember that we did a training 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I wanted to show an extended version of parts therapy with the Simpson Protocol. How to get the parts and do the work with the superconscious mind. And we tried it 3 times with 3 different persons. And it always said, no parts that are causing the problem. Yeah, okay, I can live with it. I agree with that. If it says no, we will not work on that. But I can, so everything I know, I can integrate it and just ask a simple question and accept the answer of the superconscious mind. So if someone, let's say you're a doctor specialized in the gut and everything, I'm pretty sure someone who has that deep understanding can maybe ask other questions that I could ever do. I have the trust by just maybe asking, is there anything to do in the gut? Okay, yes or no. And if I get a little into the nitty-gritty, I may get a little different outcome. So I can just get the conscious mind on my side because it sees, oh, there is some stuff going on, some whatever. So, but I can integrate everything I know from other trainings as long as I follow the philosophy of Simpson Protocol. And let me just add something. I'm very old-fashioned, old school. So sometimes, Simpson Protocol has evolved and so it changed a lot over the years without changing the philosophy. And sometimes I always just like fall back into what I learned years before because it worked. It works for me. It works for the clients. And I don't need any of this fancy additional stuff because I get great outcomes with the just basic Simpson Protocol as we've done it for hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years. Yes. Well, I agree to a certain extent, but I've gotten to be very open by now, and I don't have to do any of those things because I open it's very interesting that the person's amount of trust will show in what they have to do. So they have to, if they believe they need those questions, they'll need the questions.
Yeah.
Yep. On both sides,
If they,
on the practitioner and also on the client side. Yeah.
Yeah, but the client doesn't know. If they're there for the first time, they haven't a clue.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you have to take them through. So if you take them through and your mind is very open and the clients get open, you can have magic. Magic can happen, but it can't happen if you have to do every question. They still get the good outcome. Don't get me wrong, they do. They're going to get the outcome, but they're not going to get the full outcome.
Mm.
You understand?
Well,
Mhm.
I'm sure. So the most important part is that our listeners understand, or
Well, I think
but
that
they
he
will.
understands, but that doesn't have that little screwed up look on his face. Then the client will understand. I mean, the person listening will understand.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when you have trust, it makes it, your outcome is always very big. So when you're starting, your trust is not that high. So on the forum, they come and they ask this, and there's always the same questions. It's going, well, consciously, what do I do now? But it's, you can tell them, you don't have to worry. That's never anything to worry about. Superconscious is trustable.
I think a lot of people, or a lot of new practitioners, sometimes they need the proof somehow. They need to see and
They're
to
still in their they're still trying to figure out consciously.
yeah. And what's also new in the Simpson Protocol for other people who just only use, let's say, regression, we also work in Simpson Protocol with a state like high, we call it. Yeah, the concept of working in high. How does the feeling of being high differ from the traditional hypnosis states like somnambulism or a stale state? How do you see that?
You want to go or do I go?
So from my point of view, is just like, so for me came that aha moment when someone in the training said, well, so if you go through the somnambulism and Estale and too high, it doesn't feel like hypnosis anymore. So and I can tell you, I don't feel a difference. But even in deepest Estale, and Uwe, you remember, I was in Estale while a surgery, and you were the hypnotist. And if you want to ask me after, or had asked me after the session, I would say I wasn't in hypnosis, because it just felt like normal. I'm laying there, eyes closed, but so I felt there was no pain and no nothing going on. But for me, it was just like, so, and I'd say it's a different experience for everyone, and it's also a different experience from session to session. So there is no,
There's
as
no
we always say,
specific place.
no specific place, and also no specific feeling or
No.
knowing, or it's just
No.
like superconscious mind brings you to the best point.
And people all have different modalities how to do hypnosis. They all do it functional. Each is unique in their function of doing hypnosis. So what are you going to decide to do? I don't decide anything, because I ask Superconscious, and he'll decide where she's going, he's going, she's going. We have 3 words we have, what is it? But 3 words. Come on, Steve, what are they? They're
I don't know what
beneficial. Beneficial. What? Oh, yeah. Optimum and what? And appropriate. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. They're stuck on, they're somewhere out there. But those things are always, they're according to the client with those parameters. So if they're really open, they can have anything. If they're not, they'll get what they get.
Yeah.
And I'm like that too. I mean, there's certain things I've had in my life. I had some strokes. I had this, I had that. And I worked with Simpson Protocol to improve what I have. Now I still forget things, you see. And all the time, Superconscious just does everything for me, except he said, go to the hospital.
All right.
So I went to the hospital because that was against my belief. My limiting beliefs were I shouldn't take pills. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. So that was taken away. That was a limiting belief.
Can I?
And Superconscious said that has to go.
I'd like to add something. It's not just of the question because you just mentioned the hospital. So in a normal day, so if you get more trust and more into the work, superconscious mind, the force, however we will call it, will find a way to communicate with you. And now comes the important part. Especially if you're new to this work, you won't listen. You will ignore that. And sometimes, just 2 days ago, I was on my sunset walk and I was passing that one house, and out of nothing, there was just this little voice whispering to me. And in the past, I would have ignored it and just said, yeah, whatever comes to my mind. But nowadays, it's gentle, it's soft, and it's usually coming once at a time. And if you ignore it, you will get like maybe bad outcomes or whatever. So especially when I start, so bring it back to Simpson Protocol, because I don't want to go into what it says at that moment. But if you have at the beginning of the work with Simpson Protocol, there will maybe come thoughts, ideas, or whatever to your mind. But if you ignore this, you will get harder sessions because the voice has a good meaning, wants to get a good outcome. So when I started the work, it was whispering to me and I ignored it. And the sessions where I ignored it were very hard. So just trust.
Yeah, and the way
It's the
now
most
you get
important
those, you'll get that thought or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
And then you'll ask Superconscious, do you want me to do this? And he'll say yes or no. And then you can't be any wrong. There can't be a wrong. It's either yes or no. So
Yeah.
you get to know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the trust and really listening to your little voice or intuition, however you want to call it.
Yeah, because I've worked with many psychic people. I've worked with all kinds of people. But when they use that, they can get trapped themselves in those thoughts. So if you ask Superconscious, can I have this? And the thought, yes or no, and you get a yes, then you know that it's right. But maybe it wasn't right the way they saw it, seen it. So you don't take on for doing fixing. You don't take it on. Superconscious will take care of it. And that's the biggest thing is when you interrupt superconscious mind, you'll make your sessions hard.
Right. Yeah, I have some additional questions for the future of the Simpson Protocol, and here's one for Stin. Stin, I know that Ines has officially named you as her successor, and what does this responsibility mean for you or to you, and how do you plan to preserve Ines' legacy while continuing to innovate the process and the Simpson Protocol in itself?
Boy, you are asking questions. Well, she's still here, so I
I want to.
I have not thought of it, but so from my point of view, Simpson Protocol is good as it is, even so it's moving on with all the experience we as the practitioners are making. And so let's say another thing. So I think there are parts of the world where it is less underrepresented. We have to get the people there
Yes.
into Simpson Protocol. Just look around me, then you know what part of the world I'm talking about, because there is still work to do, even though Ines did a lot of work over here. So, and I think as we see Simpson Protocol like an organism, the evolution is going on. And as I have trust in the superconscious mind, I'm pretty sure superconscious mind will lead us into the right direction and will preserve it in the most beneficial way. So, and this is what I see it. It's just like I always have trust that the things will get in the right direction. And I'm just, well, I'm in California right now. Let's say we will surf through the life with SP. So without not, we will catch the waves as and how they come. And I don't want to lead it in a specific direction because, I know I want to have people who do the work out there, because from my point of view, it's the best therapy tool we have to get great outcomes. So, that's just it. And we just need more practitioners.
I'm not worried about him. Yeah. I'm not worried about it because if he's open and superconscious is in charge. So that's
And he
if
is
he
open.
remembers that superconscious is in charge. Yeah. That's
So this is the one thing that you want to.
Let me just add one thing. Back in the day, in 2013, I was sitting here and I said, well, somehow I'd like to teach that in Germany, but I may have to take a little time until I approach that and just like pitch it to Ines. And because I have trust in the universe is taking care of me, I got an SMS, or was it in WhatsApp? I don't really know. I don't really remember. And Ines asked, hey, would you like to teach Simpson Protocol in Germany? So, superconscious mind is taking care of the things if we have trust. Okay, so just my 2 cents.
No, it's true. I think if we start getting into it and being concerned about it, being worried about it, that won't work. If you just be open and accepting.
Yeah, that's cool. I think we are nearly at the end of the time, right? Yeah, I would say.
Got another few moments.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I shoot one question, and then we slowly wrap it up. How's that? Okay. So then my next question would be, okay, when Hypno School right now, for example, is the new major hub for sharing, for bringing Simpson Protocol and the training into the world. How Stin, for example, how do you ensure, or how do you want to ensure that the quality and the spirit of the Simpson Protocol remains consistent as it spreads across different languages and cultures and countries?
Well,
how
it all starts with a very good training. And so I can just talk for myself. I always want that the students get the best training they can get. So, and with the modern technology, so I have a lot of training videos, and with modern technology, I can make sure that these videos will easily convert into different languages. So, and so for my students, they know that I will just, if I see them doing the work and I see that they do, let's say, little mistakes, usually they don't do bigger mistakes, that they do little mistakes, I will just correct them and explain to them why it is maybe better in a different way to approach the things. And with that growing community of Simpson Protocol practitioners, they will help each other. And there is one more thing. The most important thing is follow the philosophy. Trust and follow the philosophy.
Yes.
Because if you follow the philosophy of Simpson Protocol, you can't do anything wrong, and you will always have the best quality. Yeah.
All right. And how would the both of you, how would you see, or what would you say to someone who is new a little bit to hypnosis, or maybe knows hypnosis but doesn't have Simpson Protocol in his toolkit? Why should the Simpson Protocol be the foundation of a hypnotherapist or a therapist practitioner rather than just another tool in their kit? Why is it so foundational here?
It's a mindset. It's a mindset of being open. It's a mindset of knowing that, having trust as usual, but they build that as time goes on. They don't. When they're first practitioner, they've got trust compared to a client, but they'll build the trust continuously every time they make a better outcome.
And I think, yeah,
that's it. What would you say?
I'd say, I'd say it. So years ago, because he already died, there was this New York State criminal trial defense lawyer, and he said something that just it's still in my mind. And so I quote him: usually hypnosis uses therapy tools in hypnosis, but Simpson Protocol is hypnosis. So he said that. So and I liked it because, I always say it's the gold standard of hypnotherapy, because it's a process, and I can fix every problem, or we can work on every. So I will not say fix. Fix is maybe the wrong word. We can work on every problem that shows up in our office. We can work with every client. We have a structured process. We have the philosophy. So I don't need anything else. It's just like I can approach, or with the Simpson Protocol approach, I can work with every issue without thinking of, what can I do? What do I have to do? What else can I do? I have that thing. I can give it up to the superconscious mind. It will lead us through the session to get the best result, the best outcome, without going to a Facebook group or whatever and ask, hey, there is someone showing up with XYZ problem. How can I approach it? I don't need that, because I have that structured process and I can just walk through. Not taking care of what's the problem. We work on getting to the desired outcome, so we don't focus on it.
Yeah, let's say, for example, can I give you an example of something I didn't do good in? I was working with someone with ALS. You know what that is? Lou Gehrig's disease. Yeah. So I worked with him, and he improved himself, got his fingers straight, got his this. He never got further than that because his outside of his outcome was against him. He was not in the proper place to get it. He was going detrimentally down all the time, not being able to use his muscles. And so he was not very good. I never made it because he wasn't in the right place physically. And he doesn't have any money because he's in the state he is. So it doesn't work in our world necessarily. So you get improvement, but you don't get it finished. And so far, I've only worked on it a couple of times, 3 times or so. And all the time, they don't very often come. But it's been that kind of thing that they usually give up before they're out of there. They give up.
Okay.
So it's not magic. You need the person's soul, everything involved in it. And it depends. They can't do that because of limitations in our world.
Yeah. And there are many, I know.
Yeah.
All right.
So you might get one person and then not the next person because it depends on what their limiting beliefs are. Everything is involved. Everything.
All right. So before I wrap it up a little bit, do you want to add something or want to share something with the listeners?
No, anything? Nope.
Nope. So I just do something. So if you're new and you think, okay, I have to learn Simpson Protocol, you can reach out to me on hypnoschool.de. So, and email us at Stin, that is STIN at hypnoschool.de. And yeah, we are offer trainings in video all around the world. So feel free to join. If you say, I'm ready for the Porsche 911 Turbo S of hypnotherapy.
All right. All right. So thank you, Ines. Thank you very much. And thank you, Stin, for being here in the podcast. And thank you for sharing your wisdom.
And thank you, Uwe, for being a great moderator, host again.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime again.
And thank you, Miss Ines, for that little 1 hour preparation time to get on this podcast.
Is that an hour? No.
Well, maybe 1.5.
No, I was thinking less, but that's okay.
Yeah. So for the listener, I texted her on my morning walk if she's ready for that, and we set it up within the 60 to 90 minutes. So thank you for joining us and taking the time.
Yeah, we enjoyed it.
We did it. And this is the 100th episode of this podcast. And I can say, it's clear that the Simpson Protocol is not just a technique as you might have seen right now and have a feeling for it, but it's a profound way of allowing the mind to heal itself. And to all the listeners, to you and you and you and you, I can say, if you want to dive deeper, like Stin said, be sure to check out the Hypno School website, the app, and see the resources about Simpson Protocol on the Simpson Protocol website as well. And now I can say, just for the next 100 episodes, let's push it to the boundaries of what's possible. And until then, I would say keep an open mind to all what's possible.
And build up your trust. So, bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Das war der Hypno School Podcast. Baue das Selbstvertrauen auf, das du brauchst, um erfolgreich mit Hypnose zu arbeiten. Lerne jetzt Hypnose und Hypnosetherapie auf www.hypnoschool.de.